Jack Strabrowski here. Let's talk a little bit about generating new ideas. And of course, this is in the context of new product development. A couple of quotes by me. I like to say, I'm not creative, I'm just a thinker that keeps coming up with good ideas. My second favorite quote: the more I try to solve unusual problems, the more creative and innovative I become. Both are key ideas and key notions for generating new ideas. That is, you have to practice at it and you have to be at least confident that you can come up with new ideas when you need to. It's important to understand that there is a big difference between eccentric people, creative people, and those capable of generating new product ideas. That is, goal-directed creativity and innovation. The best way to identify those capable of generating new ideas is to look, of course, at their track record. But let's go back to the beginning of this. Lots of people are eccentric. Sometimes they get confused as being creative. And even creative people are sometimes confused with those capable of generating new product ideas. It helps to be creative to generate new product ideas, but that's not sufficient. You have to be able to go through the whole process of coming up with creative ideas and then being able to figure out how to take those products, those ideas to market. For those of you who are working in large organizations or firms, let's talk a little bit about new product ideation. I love the term new product ideation because it sounds somehow less messy and more corporate. New product ideation is the process of generating, structuring, and refining creative concepts to solve user pain points and to capture marketing opportunities. It involves moving from a fuzzy front end of open brainstorming to the final stages of validating viable concepts. This is mostly a corporate, bureaucratic approach. And in those organizations, they focus on 5 aspects of product ideation. Creativity, and of course, we've talked about creativity before. It's important to have new creative ideas. To be good at product ideation, you need to have a customer focus. After all, at the end of the day, it's whether or not customers validate your new product with adoption. Third, it has to do with collaboration among people in the organization to develop a group of individuals who are motivated to make this new product idea successful. It also takes some open-mindedness in the organization, people who are at least supporting the idea moving forward, even if they have doubts about whether or not it is viable. And then, of course, the other thing about product ideation is the requirement that there be lots of iterations. That is, 2 steps forward and 1 step back in terms of moving any new product idea through the gauntlet of new product development. Here are the typical, once again, bureaucratic corporate steps in new product ideation. And of course, they have 10 steps here. It could be 5 steps, 7 steps. It doesn't make any difference. But let's just look at a few of these ideas here. It's identify objectives and constraints, gathering market insights, forming cross-functional teams, generating ideas, evaluating and prioritizing ideas, refining and developing concepts, testing and validating, of course, business analysis, selection of final concepts, and development of a marketing plan moving forward. Now, I don't think that an individual necessarily thinks through this in this manner, but this is more of a bureaucratic approach and a more of a big company approach, and what you'll see in almost all new product management textbooks. In those textbooks, they'll talk about the new product concept versus the new product. So let's talk a little bit about this idea of the idea of a new product concept. The new product concept has three aspects: the form of the product, the technology or skill set necessary to deliver the product, and the benefits associated with the product. The concept becomes a new product when it's on the market in its final form. Technology permits us to develop a form that produces a particular sort of benefit. The key idea here is that you can start with any of the three. However, putting benefits first moves us towards the marketing concept, while putting benefits last puts us at the sales concept mode and runs the risk of product solutions looking for a problem. And of course, this goes back to the Moonbeam alarm clock example that I have at Westcox, in that we developed a new form and a new technology, and we had a benefit in mind. It just turns out that the benefit was secondary to our fascination with the technologies and forms. That almost always results in potential problems. Okay, let's look at an example where benefits or uses were a last thought rather than a first thought. I'm reminded often of this. Not too long ago, I was in Reno for an EPSCoR program. EPSCoR is an example of a program that puts form and technology first and uses and benefits last. EPSCoR is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. And it's a joint program of the National Science Foundation and several U.S. states and territories. The program promotes the development of the state's science and technology resources through partnerships involving states, universities, industries, and government and federal research. All right, so we have every conceivable version of the government involved in this. And of course, they fund work on new forms of technology, but without any real attempt to identify innovative uses of any of the forms of technology. So they might be working on new ways to for desalination, um, and some sort of new technology, and maybe some new approaches to that whole process. When they get done with that, and the government spent a bunch of money on it, their next step is that EPSCoR has a number of conferences where individuals are invited, where individuals demonstrate their findings, discoveries, and inventions. And then other people who are at the conference, like me, try to find ways to commercialize these discoveries, inventions, or findings into some sort of commercial value. It's an interesting process, and I think that it is at a minimum something that is fun to go to, and is really good for people who are outside the box thinkers. But enough of these corporate bureaucratic approaches to generating new ideas. Let's take a more micro or individual level approach to generating new ideas. After all, each of you are typically on your own sum in terms of generating new ideas. Let me suggest this: it takes both creative and innovative thinking to be good at the individual level of generating new ideas. Um, in new product development, it is critical to be both creative and innovative rather than simply creative. Much of the corporate academic frameworks focus much on creative ideas rather than in innovative commercialization or the innovation part of the process. Perhaps this is due to the belief that firms can perform accurate market opportunity analyses, and so they don't really have to worry much about that. Let me just say this. If you believe that this is true, take a look at all the new product failures by very large successful firms. You have to have creativity and innovation for each individual to be a successful new product development. To be good at generating high potential new products, you need to have both sets of skills, creative skills and innovative skills. All right, here's a little list of 12 ways to produce new ideas for an individual. Take something out. An example, of course, was carbonated soft drinks when I was a child. And then suddenly someone was able to take the sugar out of them and turn them into diet carbonated soft drinks, which of course is a huge percentage of that market today. You might add something. All right. So instead of taking something out, look at the product, look at the idea of the product, and ask yourself, could we add something that would create more value? Third on this list, I think is a good idea. Listen to customer gripes. And even if you're not highly involved where you can get your hands on individual customers, go up and look at reviews. Go up and look at complaints and gripes on consumer websites. Think about transferring one concept from another category to your category. And then, of course, this would be the idea of something like, look at how they did this in the in the fast food business. How about what happens when we transform this to the casual food business? Or what about something that we did in this area and this industry, and now let's see if we can transfer it to our industry. Fifth, try to make the whole task easier. The task of using the product, the task of buying the product, the task of assembling the product. Think about ways to make the task or the product easier to use. Beg, borrow, or steal. That is, look at other people and other industries and other concepts and ask yourself, is there something in this that I can use in my product category? All right, and so for example, I at one point in time owned a college bar, and some of the stuff that we decided to do at the college bar to increase interest and the number of customers every day was look at what some other organizations had done to increase their attendance. And we were able to transfer some of those concepts and ideas to our place. And we were one of the very first college bars that had a monthly calendar with something going on every single night at the bar, and really trying to create sort of a fourth space for groups to gather and have great fun every night, to get involved and be part of the college bars community. Product substitutability. That is, what can be substituted for what to create a product. If you think about some place like the Whopper, and of course we now have the Whopper with made with an Impossible Burger. That's really a product substitutability, right? We take the traditional ground beef patty that is flame broiled at Burger King and substitute it with a flame broiled alternative Impossible Burger. When you're thinking about new ideas and you're thinking about the product and a product category, don't be so literal. That is, don't worry about the rigid dictionary definitions of what fast food is, for instance, and instead open up the throttle a little bit. Read between the lines. Speak in terms of vibes, subtext, and creative metaphors. Get outside the box a little bit that has been generated by those people who run that particular industry. I always recommend that we look overseas, or at least to California. When I lived in the Midwest, we found that lots of new ideas for new products and new trends and the next big thing were either overseas or at least in California. Another good idea to come up with better new ideas is learn all about the product and its markets. That is, learn all about the product and what goes into that product and why that product is successful and what are the limitations for that product and its markets, which of course are the customers. If you know your customers, you know your business. So always understand the customers in your product category. Experience the product yourself. Don't just think about a product, experience it. And this is especially true when we talk about generating new experiences. You can't generate a new experience and figure out how to change, for instance, a state park that has very low attendance into something that has higher attendance. You really can't figure out how to do that unless you go out and at first experience that state park yourself. You want to figure out what to do with the Grand Canyon? Well, at least go and visit the Grand Canyon, experience it yourself. Ask yourself, what's the good stuff? What's the bad stuff? We know what the bad stuff is for the Grand Canyon, by the way, and there are ways that that could be fixed. And then finally, always go back and think about the product. Not just learning about it, but think about it. Think about the product. The more you think about it, the more likely it is that you'll come up with some creative ideas about how to improve it over time, or maybe even come up with something completely new. Now I have what I call my list of favorite approaches to creativity or new product ideas. I call it Jack's favorite activities or an analytical guy's approach to creativity. One of my favorites is incubation. Uh, when I was a little younger and I used to run almost every day, my one of my approaches to new product development and creative ideas was to think about the product for a while, learn all I could about the product and its markets, move to the point where I was knowledgeable and I understood the situation, and then let that incubate in your mind for a while because your subconscious will continue to work on problems even when you're not outwardly thinking about them. And of course, when in doubt, I used to always just go for a run, let those endorphins kick in. And by the time I got back from a 3 or 4 mile run, I typically had some interesting new ideas for the product. Sometimes they weren't very good ideas, but they would generate new ideas and new things to think about. A second approach that I like to use when I look at especially generating new products is segmenting the market. Now, your approach to segmentation is probably not the same as mine. I'm a benefit segmentation person. I know because I've been in this industry a long time that things like demographic segmentation simply don't work. They're easy to use, but they don't work. Geographic segmentation doesn't really work. But when you get down and start looking using benefit segmentation, then you get to understand what the true underlying benefits are of any particular product. And then you can start to identify where you might create new products in the product line to meet some of those smaller or untapped segments. You want to be better at coming up with new ideas? Do a situation analysis. Of course, this is always part of the market opportunity analysis anyway, but do a situation analysis. Look at the firm itself and what the firm is good at and not good at. You should always try to create new products that play into your strengths. Look at the industry. Once you understand the industry and the rules of the game for any particular product category, you'll be better prepared to come up with new ideas. Go back and look at the customers. If you know your customers, you know your business. Look at the competitors. The competitors often give you new ideas about what to do next. And then look at the macro environment. What are the big trends in the macro environment that may change the way we look at this whole business 4 or 5 years from now? If there's going to be some sort of a major shift in the next 3 or 4 years in any industry, then what we need to be thinking about is, how are we going to take advantage of that? Think about Las Vegas right now and the water shortages that we are experiencing now and will be experiencing in the future. 5 years from now, it's going to be worse. It's not going to be better. It's going to be worse than it is right now. Well, is there some way to take advantage of that with our product category? Maybe. Analyze your competitors' activities. One of the best places to look at new ideas is see what the competitors have from new ideas. I've been closely watching the Dutch brothers, coffee, and and they are a sort of a direct competitor to Starbucks, and it's interesting because almost all their new products are things that came from other organizations that supply drinks to lots and lots of younger people. And so it's good to look at what your competitors are doing, because their decisions about new products and new services and new experiences are obviously based on something that they've seen. And maybe it's something that you've missed. And so always look at what the competitors are doing. And even competitors in non-direct competitors who are still competing for some of the same customers as you. Also, always look at a trend analysis. Always look at trends. What's going on in our industry? What's going on in other industries? What's going on in the macro environment? Identify trends. Trends lead to new opportunities. I like to think about the concept of opposites. Just as an example, one of the biggest trends in smartphones today is bigger and bigger screens. And in fact, the newest trend, of course, are folding phones that fold out into one big screen. And of course, as a result, cell phones are getting to be bigger and bigger and bigger. And I remember back in the old days when the goal for the cell phones was to keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So my argument is, rather than looking at maybe bigger and bigger and bigger cell phones, maybe we ought to be looking at smaller and smaller and smaller cell phones. Just a thought. But the idea is, if everybody else is looking at bigger, you look at smaller. If everybody else is looking at faster, you look at slower. If everybody else is looking at more expensive, you look at less expensive. Think in opposites. It's sort of like getting the wheels in your mind to turn in the opposite direction. And then again, I always say, beg, borrow, and steal. Look at other industries that are related to yours, and even some industries that might not be related to yours, but where companies are doing creative things. Those are Jack's favorite activities for coming up with creative new ideas that, of course, still have to be vetted through the market opportunity analysis process. There are two basic sources for new product ideas, of course. One is generated internally as a result of goal-directed activity to create new ideas. And of course, we're all familiar with that, right? We've been through those 10 steps and all that nonsense. So there are these new ideas that are generated in a very formal way by individuals and teams looking at new opportunities in certain areas. And like I said, I used to be involved in stuff like that when I worked as an industrial engineer at Westclox. At the time, the world's largest producer of timepieces. We used to do a lot of work internally at trying to generate new product ideas. The other source of new product ideas are those already generated by somebody else. Let's look at those, because I think those are really interesting. Those generated by someone else, it could be from employee suggestions. One of the best sources for new product ideas is employees, if you're willing to sit down and listen to them. Some of the stuff they tell you is needs to be filtered out, but employees often, since their frontline interactions with the customers, are able to identify unmet wants and needs and what customers really want instead of what they're getting. Of course, along with that, customers' complaints and reviews. Always a good place to look if you're trying to generate new product ideas. Look at customer complaints and look at customer reviews. I'm not a believer in anecdotal evidence here, but I am a believer in us using complaints and reviews as a starting point to generate new ideas. Also, it's important, I think, to look at resellers. So if I've got a product that is being resold, how are what are the best products for resellers? I have friends who are in the golf club design business, and one of the things that I think that they need to do is look at what older clubs are still considered to be high value. If those clubs are high value, then what it means is somehow they have maintained their competitive advantage over time, and you might want to take a look at those particular products. Suppliers and vendors are always trying to provide you with new products, new things to buy, but they are also a good source for your development of a new product. Once again, as we talked before, always a good source of new product ideas are your competitors. A lot of small companies, like small fast food restaurants, look at someone like McDonald's or someone like Jack in the Box, or even someone like Burger King as they tried to reinvent themselves. Looking at those competitors, you don't have to do the market research that McDonald's can afford to do if you just simply look and see what they eventually bring to market. If they bring something to market, they must know something, and at least it's a starting place for you. Not necessarily what you should do, but at least a place that you should look. And then, of course, there is this whole industry of people who are inventors, like the EBSCOR stuff that I had talked about previously. Those people what might help you to identify new things that are that haven't really been innovatively transformed into your industry. Others, you can talk to people that are consultants. You might talk to people who are in ad agencies that work in this business. Market research firms are often have really good ideas. You might go to a university. There might be 2 or 3 people at the university who are working in the academic marketing department that actually do some marketing and actually work as consultants or work in the marketing business. You can go to think tanks. You can go to government agencies like EBSCOR, or maybe even look in trade publications. All right. Now, these are maybe a little bit more far afield, but the more you learn about your product category, the more you learn about the customers, the more you learn about the industry around it, and the more that you learn about the competition, the more likely you are to be able to generate new product ideas. Individual skill levels. To be good at new product development, you have to be knowledgeable and have expertise about the product category. You need to be creatively thinking. That is relating how you approach problems and opportunities to this particular scenario. You have to have good communication skills with the ability to explain and sell your ideas to others. If you can't sell your idea to someone in 60 seconds, probably isn't such a good idea. And of course, you have to have conviction. That is the motivation to move ideas forward and address issues and challenges that are roadblocks to moving your new product ideas forward. In summary, to be a rock star at generating new product ideas, you need to be good at understanding the situation and unmet customers' wants and needs. Plus, you need to have the skills to perform an accurate market opportunity analysis. So, what do you say? Let's get started.